Test, test, test.
I'm on too. Hello, Danny.
You can hear me?
We
Okay.
can.
Yes, yes.
Could you not hear me when I kicked off the call? Like a minute ago? No?
Yeah, we could.
I just joined.
Could
Yeah,
not or
we-
could? I'm sorry. We're kicking off the call. Can somebody give us an update as to the current Sepolia testnets?
Yes, sure. So we just had 2 days ago a Sepolia fork on Chechang testnet, and we had a great success. I feel like we managed to pull everything off. We didn't encounter any issues actually. So
Great. Did we
Well,
send bad blocks and things?
No, we didn't. I don't think we should on this public testnet. But one issue that we found is some geth nodes syncing up would encounter a bad block. And
wasn't it
this
a
bad
config
block
issue
is-
in the end?
No, the issue is most likely that some client is not RLP encoding the block correctly. And so we most likely, we're not 100% sure. Most likely we get a block from the network that is not encoded correctly. We decode it, and then at some point we error because instead of the withdrawals being an empty list, it is nil. And so our encoding and decoding is correct. We checked that. And so, yeah, I would encourage all other execution layer clients to also make sure or create a test that they encode and decode withdrawals correctly.
This did not happen when you were syncing from Genesis, right?
Yes,
When you didn't sync.
like it can happen if you sync from Genesis. It's dependent on the peer that gives you the block. Like the peer might give you the block in a wrong format, basically. And yeah, it really depends on the peer. If this block is correct or not. And usually we would like discard these blocks in an earlier stage. But because it is a valid RP encoding, it's just the wrong RP encoding. We only find this when trying to execute the block.
Marius, you will
Lucas?
verify never mind, but can you maybe like log this peer when this happens? Especially on this network?
Yeah, well, the problem is that it's very unreliable because it only happens on blocks with empty withdrawals, which is only the first one, I think, because now we have this the withdrawal credential set. I can try to do more things and see if actually like there's a lot of things that have to go right for us to notice this, right? We have to sync this specific block from this specific from one peer that that has this bug, and so yeah, I can
Yeah.
try.
I
Would
mean,
you
since
like
you
me
know the
to?
block, you could presumably just ask for that block from a bunch of peers, but people could also just look at their code.
Yes, I think everyone should create some unit tests for it.
I can also just spin up a new network where we don't do any BLS changes, and then this would be a very small net, but we would be able to test this if needed.
Yeah, and I think in the end we will probably be able to reproduce this with a Hive test, with the Hive sync tests. But yeah, we don't have those yet for post Shanghai, I think.
Okay, thank you, Marius. Yeah, I mean, even if we find it in a testnet, this should definitely land upstream in unit tests. So please take a look. Anything else on this testnet?
Not sure. We haven't done too many BLS changes on it to allow different users to test their withdrawals and BLS changes. So I don't even intend to do any more of them. So if we need to do more BLS changes, I would advise to just spin up DevNet 7, I think, where we can do some more of that. But I'm just curious if anyone else still needs to do some BLS change testing.
Yeah, does anybody else need DevNet 7 to do BLS change testing, or have we hit that sufficiently in other nets? My gut is that people are pretty comfortable with that at this point. Okay. Someone raised relayer builder testing. I believe this has not yet been tested on any of the DevNets, nor on the current testnet. Does anybody know the status of being able to test these basic flows?
I have tried to reach out to Flashbots regarding trying to get someone on board on to this new testnet that we are running, but I have heard nothing back.
Right.
It'd be great
From
to-
Alex's latest update, he said that he had an implementation from MVP Boost that's Capella ready. So if anyone wants to test it, can ping him. But I think the blockade here is just to have a capable relayer and builder. That is what's missing today. So yeah, the sooner we can get to that, the better.
Lodestar is also Capella ready to test the builder changes.
Is this something we should be testing on Sepolia only, or should we bring it to the public testnet that we just launched?
You mean Shizhang or another one?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, the plan is to test on Shizhang if you know, if things are ready in time. If we fork Sepolia, then we may as well just test there. But yeah, that being said, I know Flashbots is working on getting something ready, and I think in the next couple of days, if not next week, so pretty soon.
Protos?
I think we shouldn't even talk about forking Sepolia without testing first the builder.
I disagree.
Yeah, I don't think we should really wait because there's no reason to. So all clients have a fallback in the event that this MedBoost pipeline fails.
Any other inputs on that? I do think if we're moving toward, assuming the order is Sepolia, Goerli, mainnet, if we're moving into Goerli and haven't had this tested, I think we should certainly be having a conversation about timelines and making sure that it gets tested.
One concern I would have about not testing this before Sepolia is that we have basically 2 chances before mainnet to test the fork transition behavior of this, and to the degree that there's anything particularly interesting around that, and there may well be, then that's it. Like we have Sepolia and we have Goerli, and that's it. And so it's, I think, adding that one chance by having some kind of DevNet or some other situation where we can get some sense of what the builder and relay are going to do and the different clients are going to do is useful. I would agree with POTUS on this.
So at least, and we're about to talk about timelines. The date tossed around is 27, 28. So we're talking about 20 days. Those that have been working on that boost, those have been talking to Flashbots and others. Is that a reasonable timeline to have this up on Sepolia? Is that what the expectation here?
I think it's hard to say without having people from Flashbots here. I was just looking, I don't see them on the call. But yeah, definitely that would be the intention.
Got it.
But without moving forward with forks, I don't think Flashbot is going to move forward with development. So I feel like this is something that maybe could be forced.
Right. I do think generally, like, we've not sort of waited on infrastructure providers, and mostly because of that reason, like the protocol already moves pretty slowly. And so if like we're not the ones to sort of set the pace, then the fork just never makes it to the top of teams' priority list. I understand MEV boost is like a bit different than something like, say, Infura, something like that. But yeah, I think there is sort of a risk if we start sort of moving your timelines based on everyone in the ecosystem being ready, that will sort of be blocked by the slowest ones.
Photos.
So the way testing works is, so we're gonna go without having ever tested a builder, and 95% of our blocks go through builders currently. So we have a couple of stages that will save us. The first one is that if there is a bug and the bug is in the builder, not in the relayer, then we're just going to fall back to local execution. This is not really being tested at all either. Then there is, if there's more serious bugs and blocks start missing because the bug is in the relayer, which again hasn't been tested, then we're going to fall back on using this check that if certain number of blocks are missing, we're going to fall back to local execution. But this also hasn't been tested. So we have like an entire system, an entire fork, which is hanging on completely untested software. I don't feel comfortable at all signing off my own clients, my own work on something that I haven't tested.
I hear you. Is there a reasonable way to test those flows on our testnets? Because I think that's ultimately what this group can be responsible for. And I think given a MEV boost implementation, we can very likely hit both of those, right?
I think it's very easy for us to agree not to support MedBoost at the fork for a while and just ship at a later date a fix when the builder is actually tested. We can agree now that every CL client is not going to support MedBoost at the fork. And fine, if there is a pool that actually wants to fork our clients and risk it, so be it.
And what does it mean to not support MevBoost? Is it, yeah, I'm curious how you would
to force local execution, right? So we can easily force local execution on a Capella block.
Okay, so not even just being a, because you could imagine a softer version of this where you just put like a big warning, right? Like where you just say in the docs or whatnot, like, you know, this is untested with MevBoost, run it at your own risk. But you're saying you go a step beyond that where the default code paths are turned off. Is that right?
I'm saying that the only two reasonable things in my mind are either waiting until this is tested and then delaying the fork until we actually have tested this, or just disable MevBoost support, disable any non-local execution on the CL clients until this is tested.
So I mean, it's off by default, and I think that we shouldn't have the timeline be defined by external like infrastructure. And we can test as much as we can test, which is specifically like the consensus client interaction with MAV boost / the relay, because we can make like fake relays, but we like, I don't think we can just wait for a relay implementation to appear.
There's definitely some comments in the chat worth surfacing. I think people are worried about the precedent of getting hung up on infrastructure providers. I think it's also people would be deciding between the profits that they are seeking or not having those versus running non-canonical forks. Also, those large infrastructure providers or large staking providers are going to have private MEV deals regardless, or run forked clients regardless. So then you get high asymmetries between those types of providers and home stakers. Are there any other comments people want to surface from the chat or on this in general?
One thing I can add is around the merge, we started work on some kurtosis tests to test the fallback in like an automated way. That's something we could definitely spin back up and run for Capella. I do think it makes sense to do what is, you know, is within our control, and then separately, you know, Flashbots, whoever others timelines are their own timelines.
Right, and we aren't just, I think that's important, we're not just talking about Flashbots. There's a whole ecosystem of people that run relayers and builders that are highly incentivized to do this, even if not on our timeline.
And also, it's worth noting, so like say we talked about forking Sepolia late February, which is still like 20 days from now. I don't believe there's any like significant builder infrastructure set up on that. The builder infrastructure is set up on Gordy, I believe. So that means you'd probably have another week or two, you know, before you forked Gordy, assuming Sepolia went well. So then you're sort of like at, I don't know, call it like early mid-March, which is, you know, over a month from now. And then after Gordy, you'd probably, I think Gordy is when you'd want to see, hopefully, something like MEV Boost be ready and relay implementations be sort of ready to support it. It doesn't seem like a month is like an insanely short timeline. And then even beyond that, you would get a couple weeks after Gordy forking, you know, before the mainnet upgrade. So I think basically the sort of timeline pressure we would be putting on by moving to Sepolia now is something like in the next month, you know, MEV Boost, you know, software providers would need to like be ready. And it seems kind of different to say that than say like, oh, a week from now they should be ready.
So it seems like we could potentially test backup flows in kurtosis. We could potentially test backup flows in Hive, although I don't know if MevBoost is integrated in Hive at all right now. And we could potentially test them on a transient DevNet. Do we have the resources to do so? I know that we wouldn't be testing necessarily the Flashbots relay at that point, but we can certainly sanity check that these code paths that we care about work.
Yeah, and it's worth calling out that, you know, with this fallback, like it almost doesn't matter when other people, you know, do their thing. For example, if Flashbots doesn't update software in time, then like the very first step will fail and you'll fall back to local production and, you know, the chain will be fine. So it's, I think, mostly important to focus on that.
I guess the concern here is that we haven't even tested the fallback, so that we don't know if the fallback will work at first place.
I mean, I think it's,
We've actually hit it in Lighthouse on a testnet in the past, but not with any of the current code.
so we can definitely go ahead.
Sorry. Well, one concern is that for me is that it's not. I mean, people are kind of articulating these scenarios where it either just works or it doesn't work. And my concern is sort of the broad middle ground where it's kind of glitchy. It's technically there. All of the clients, well, okay, maybe not from POTUS here, but like most of the clients maybe claim to support it. Flashbots claims to support it, but it's basically just not been tested all that well. And then it's, if nothing else, setting this expectation of will the fallbacks be expected. There will be a lot of support requests, I think, in that case, of people expecting it to work, but not experiencing it not working for any number of reasons. So this is my concern, not just like that it will not work or it will work. Even if the fallbacks work as designed, as in theory they should, then I think there's a downside risk for the CS.
Right. So I think to mitigate that risk, we want to do like a staged rollout. So like, you know, let's say that none of the stuff is ready in time for like Sepolia, then like we basically are using the fallbacks, and then each client team can decide like once they feel comfortable, then, you know, basically add support for the new thing.
Sure, that's one approach.
Okay, I think importantly, it would be really valuable to test these fallbacks in a more automated way, or at least in a DevNet. Does anybody have a vision for how to do that, or do we need to take this to an issue?
So does anyone know what the status of like Hive would be? I think we feel pretty comfortable with working with Hive. Otherwise, yeah, I can work on the kurtosis stuff.
Hi, currently there's no support for any MEV boost related stuff in Hive. We need to rework Hive in order to be able to test anything.
What does rework mean? Just like, does that involve like invasive changes or just like adding support for the new piece?
I don't really know how much of a change it is, but it's not something that we instantiate the clients currently with. So at least the configuration and all that should be changing in Hive. But yeah, to know how much deep of a change it is, I need to take a look.
Okay, I mean, I think most of what we need to do in Hive has already been done in kurtosis, so I'll start there and I'll circle back around with you.
Okay, and Perry says Barnabas and I can work on a transient testnet. We can set up a mock relay and then boost on enough nodes. We can disable the mock relay to test the fallback. So that will test the secondary fallback, which is when, or no, that'll test the primary fallback, but it won't test the like fallback in which the relay sends a bid and then does not send the full block. Nonetheless, I think it would test.
Well, there's no fallback there anyways, right?
That's the if I don't see enough blocks on chain, I stop using that boost. So there's a fallback
Right.
there.
Yeah.
That's the
Well, we
more
could
accurate
also
fallback.
test those scenarios on a transient testnet though, because we could just like
Oh, right. We can just turn off block
skips, yeah.
validators. Okay. Okay. Perry Barnabas, let's make a plan outside of this to test those fallbacks. Simultaneously, let's hopefully get Alex's MEV boost in some sort of tested form, and we can dig into Hive support as well. My gut is to not currently halt Sepolia, but to parallelize a lot of these testing efforts and continue to assess over the next couple of weeks.
I think personally that MEV should not affect at all Shanghai timeline wise.
Yeah, and I believe there's certainly a large contingent here that agrees. I do think that we can do a lot more diligence on testing what we're in control of, though. Okay, anything else on build a relay boost? Okay, the next item, which we've been partially discussing, is Sepolia fork date. On the execution layer call last week, there was a general agreement if the current testnet went well to pick a Sepolia fork date. I've seen discussions of end of February, so that's something like the 28th to put it on a Tuesday. That's about 20 days from now. Let's open it up for comments on potential dates or rejections of readiness.
Maybe just one thing there. If we fork on the, call it the 28th, I think it would be great to have the blog post out on like, you know, the 20th, maybe the 21st. And so that means ideally we get client releases out like next Friday or the Monday after that. Like, I don't, so just to put it in perspective for client teams.
Right, so a week lead time in Sepolia, which is a gated validator set, is probably correct, but that becomes, you know, a week and a half release lead time. Right, I was saying Tuesday because of our biases when testing proof of work forks. We wanted to make sure it didn't accidentally land on the weekend, but a Monday fork is actually fine because we can well time it. So Barnabas did say I vote the 27th at 2 p.m. UTC, which is epoch 56700.
One thing that's nice with the Tuesday is people who forget have the Monday. Like we can kind of make a last call on the Monday for people like infrastructure providers and whatnot that like the fork is tomorrow. So I have a slight preference for the Tuesday, but not a hill I would die on.
Sepolia is a closed validator set, but it's also, they are humans and we've seen issues before.
I'm not a human.
Did you say I'm not a human?
Yeah.
Fair. Fair. Okay. I think a Tuesday date, given people waking up on Monday and saying, oh shit, and doing their work. Accounting for that is probably reasonable here. I don't think we gain or lose much in that plus or minus day in that realm. Is anybody fundamentally opposed to that as we also parallelize our builder relay fallback testing? Okay, no opposition. We will do this as default, but we will circulate this in public all core devs for the next 24 hours before this begins to be announced, etc. For anyone who is not here to speak up, but I think we're in pretty good shape to move forward. I will say that Paul did leave a comment. He said March 27th, and that we were very comfortable moving forward March 27th. I think he meant February 27th. Can anyone from Lighthouse comment on that?
I also think he meant February 27th.
Okay. Great. Okay. So Feb 28th, we can do we'll look at Adrian's tool. It's on Symphonius, and pick a fork epoch. And in the next 24 hours, we'll kind of put that up in an issue. People can thumbs up, and we'll keep moving. Okay, anything else on Sepolia for today?
Any discussion about early, maybe? Early timelines? Or would we want to wait till Sepolia is finished?
I think, especially given the builder relay testing that we want to achieve, that we should put that more of a discussion point at the end of February. Potez?
And actually, if we go with Sepolia, it would be better for us to actually have a date or a tentative date so that we can include it in today's release or in next week's release, so that we don't need to make 3 releases before mainnet.
Okay. Do others feel strongly
it's
about
fine.
getting
It's
a
either
Goerli
the
date?
same release for Goerli and mainnet or the same release for Sepolia and Goerli. And I believe that the second option is better for us, but I'm not sure if everyone agrees.
Right, so being able to do 2 instead of 3. Given the testing that we want to achieve between now and Sepolia, I am a bit more comfortable in saying, let's pick Goerli and mainnet simultaneously, rather than picking Sepolia picking Goerli with Sepolia today. But if others feel strongly about trying to pick a tentative Goerli today, I'm okay with that. Any sentiment on picking Goerli as well today?
I think it would be useful to see how Sepolia goes first. And I don't think there's much to gain from picking Goerli today.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to move forward just Sepolia with the builder testing in parallel. And when we get near the end of the month, have the conversation around, or I guess at the start of the month, call it the 2nd of March, have the conversation around Goerli and mainnet simultaneously. Okay. Moving on to 4844. I think the biggest item on the consensus layer is the block decoupling. there is an open PR, which I've done some review on, Jacek wrote, and I will open back up today. Hopefully others have had a chance to look at it. A lot of minor refinement rather than anything major, and should be able to get this done out very soon. Any discussion around that PR? Any particular items that we want to surface here rather than in the PR itself? Okay, that's just no big surprises in that PR if you've been part of the design discussions up to this point. We do have some simulation results. Anton has been looking into what coupling versus decoupling does in a simulated environment for Gossip Sub. Anton, can you maybe share your screen and show us some of these results?
Yeah, so just a second. Yeah, so yeah, this is so basically decoupling looks pretty good. So here is the like dissemination delay distribution for do you see my screen, right?
Yes, yes. And are we looking at full-time propagation or average?
Yes, this is full-time propagation. So I mean, like on the vertical axis, there is like a number of nodes which received the message or decouple or all of decoupled message in the time slots on the horizontal axis, like it's so yeah, if you can see that like for decoupled this is fully decoupled messages, which means like a block 128 kilobytes and 4 blobs. They all 5 are disseminated on their own subnets. Yeah, so here is like a network of 1,000 peers. Everyone has 100 megabits per second, and like this is like distribution of the message delay. So decoupled looks pretty cool. They are all most of them are disseminated within a second and 2. And decoupled and coupled is kind of like 2.5 seconds. So yeah, and there are like more simulations with networks where like 10% of peers have 10 megabit per second. Others have higher throughput bandwidth. Yeah, so the picture is almost the same here. Right on the right side, there are some peers that receive a message within 4 seconds, but these are the peers which have like this low bandwidth. So the peers with low bandwidth basically don't influence on the delivery time for high bandwidth peers. Yeah, and these are I would like to mention these are for the Gossip Sub with flat flat publish option off. And here is I have another graph which compares how flat publish affects like the initial message propagation. So yeah, So off when flood publish is off, the message is disseminated much faster. Yeah, because of if publisher have a good outbound channel like over maybe gigabit or even 10 gigabits, it shouldn't affect the results. So yeah, that's it for me.
Interesting. So we're seeing worse. You're seeing worse on average on flood publish being on, whereas that's the default, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you please repeat the size of the blobs or the number of blobs?
Sorry, it's question for me.
Yeah. So I think it's 128 kilobyte block and then 4 128 kilobyte blobs, and the coupled is that all being one payload versus decoupled that being 5 different payloads on 5 different subnets.
Yeah, right.
Have you also tried to to disable flood publish for blobs only and keep it enabled for blocks?
Actually, at the moment, the flood publish option is like global parallel topics. Yeah, actually, it makes sense to probably discuss this option to be topic specific. So yeah, it may make sense.
So right now, these simulation results are showing better average and worst case propagation times on the order of 40 or 50% time reduction, and are also showing that our current flood publish strategy might need to be revisited.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Also, do we like on the gossip sub layer in the simulation, do we republish as soon as we receive the message, or do we like have some delay for the processing time for the individual blobs and blocks?
Yes, I had like 10 milliseconds for validation, but it doesn't affect too much actually.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so at least these simulation results are very promising, I think significantly very promising to continue forward with the decoupling spec and implementation. I think Pop also has a simulation framework he's been working with. So when we do get some decoupled implementations, we can also validate some of the results in that environment as well. Any other questions for Anton or comments on these results? Great, thank you, Anton. This is very valuable to have at this point. Really appreciate it. Okay, looking at our agenda, anything else in 4844 for discussion today?
So on the cryptography side of this Free the Blob PR, we have implemented a verification strategy that would work with the Free the Blobs approach, such that even the blobs that travel decoupled can get validated if we want. We implemented it in CKZG and got some initial benchmarks. The verification is slightly slower than the old approach with the aggregated proof, which was created for that specific purpose, but it's not horrific, like it's not that bad. I think given the fact that the decouple strategy allows us to get the blobs faster, And we are talking about network latency, which is usually much more than cryptographic latency. I think the delay on verification can be easily excused. But this is like an initial investigation, and we will do more as the days go by. But so that like, I don't think it's reasonable to dump a bunch of numbers on this call right now. But if people are interested in discussing verification times and what we think is too much or what we think is good, get in touch or ask in the CKZG channel.
Thank you, George. Yeah, and with the, if we run into a wall there, the fallback alternative being to send just the aggregate and doing the verification, crypto verification at the end. So I think either way, we're probably going to land in a reasonable spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any questions for George? Great. Like client, what PR is this?
This is
Oh, okay.
changing the transaction SIG hash back to hash tree root.
Yeah, any objections to moving this in and getting this into our specifications for the next DevNet?
It doesn't work for the unsigned hash because there can be collisions with other transaction types. Like the transaction message, it doesn't encode anywhere that it is a blob TX type. So if there is another transaction type that adds an additional field that can have a 0 value, it will have the same hash.
But it's a Merkle root, so you don't have malleability of the message of the pre-image.
Merkle roots have this problem, but we can discuss in the PR. There is compute signing root for CL as well.
Right. Okay, Etan, if you can jump in there so that we can have that discussion, I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, anything else on 4844?
Yeah, I opened an issue on the Beacon APIs repo about the APIs for signing blobs. So generally just looking for feedback there if anyone's interested. I just linked in the chat.
Right, and so specifically this is the validator namespace on the Beacon API to allow for the decoupling, correct?
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you for keeping that moving. Anything else on 4844? Great. Xiaowei, you have a consensus layer spec warning.
Yes. So thanks to Paul Harris, K-Couple, that we had a PR that about the renaming of the old 4844 fork. Then the new name would be DNAP, and there might be other feature in the DNAP protocol upgrades. And so this PR here, oh, thanks, Danny posted. This PR will, once this PR is merged, it definitely will break. Like we have the other like 10 open for PRs. So I think by default, the spec elf, aka me, I will try to meddle in the PRs to maybe refresh them or add new commits, because I think to fix the rename, I mean the folder rename, it's easier to use replace than add more commits, append your PRs. So by default, I will try to meddle in, and the process might be slow, and just, or if you want to update your PR as soon as possible, you can do it by yourself or just ping me, and I will try to prioritize it. That's the warning here.
And sorry if you said this, when is this going in?
I think as soon as possible, we can do it today.
Okay, so this is going to be in the next release. That's the warning.
Yes.
So likely there'll be a release when we get the decoupled stuff merged, and this will certainly be associated with it.
Yep.
Any questions? Okay. Tim has a comment about consensus layer EIPs and editors.
Yes. Okay, so we discussed this a little bit at the interop in Austria. So to give some background, the idea that like right now the EL and CL have very different spec processes. You know, the CL obviously has the Python spec. The EL used to use sort of EIPs in the yellow paper. We've made a bunch of progress on the technical side on the EL to sort of align with what the CL does. So we now have a Python spec that is basically up to mainnet. And that said, you know, we think EIPs are still valuable as a way to describe sort of in plain English why a change is being done and sort of the high level kind of design decisions. And it would be nice to start having those on the CL side as well. So that say, you know, there is a change. Like, I mean, EIP 444 is actually an example where we've done this, right? Where there is an EIP that describes sort of the rationale, why we have blobs, you know, some of the risks, and then the specs are all kind of in the Python spec. But moving to something like that would be quite nice so that, you know, users and people submitting EIPs just have a single process to use if they want to make a change to Ethereum. That said, there's been some reluctance from the CL side to sort of move to the EIP process because it's perceived to have a lot of friction. And I think, you know, that's a fair concern. So we've been trying to figure out like what's a good way that we could, you know, softly onboard CL folks into the EIP process, not sort of have them burdened with all of the, I guess, overhead of the process or as little as possible. And so we had a meeting with EIP editors yesterday, and one thing we landed on was the idea of having designated CL folks join as EIP editors, which would give them kind of two things. One is obviously like the ability to just review and approve EIPs for CL folks, so that I think one of the reasons why EIPs are slow is there's just not a lot of editors, and so you know, you sort of have to wait in the queue to get reviewed. So having somebody on the CL side who just like focuses on that can help speed the process up. And then the other thing that they could do is, which hopefully you don't have to do too often, is basically override like whatever technical checks the bot does on the EIP side, so that, you know, we could be in a spot where CL EIPs sort of get merged, even though they don't pass all the, say, like spec compliance checks that happen automatically in the EIP repo. So this would be a way where, like, you know, someone from the CL side can actually force merge this stuff. And then obviously, if and when that happens, we can sort of reflect on like, what was the thing that sort of caused the friction, and can we adapt the process to like minimize that friction in the future. So the ask is, you know, if anyone on the CL side is interested to sort of take that on. And again, the scope would be just like narrow to like basically core EIPs and even just like CL EIPs. So you don't have to care about ERCs or, you know, anything else. But it's really a way to like enable your colleagues on the CL to like write these EIPs and get them merged in quickly, so that yeah, we can hopefully move towards something that's a bit more unified. Yeah. Any takers?
If you are interested reach out directly to Tim.
Yeah.
What's the status of the EOC out of EIP split?
So that's still, yeah, still contentious. I think, yeah, so the other proposal that we had was to basically split out EIPs and ERCs altogether from the repo. There's some technical overhead to do that. So like, I think, you know, the EIP editors don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it, which I can sympathize with. I still think we should do it, you know, and like, especially as we have more CL folks join, like clearly the processes will diverge. But I do think it, you know, it's easier to first bring somebody from the CL, have them like start playing around with the process. And I think that'll make it clear if and how we want the processes to diverge. Yeah, and also, yeah, just make sure that like once we do fork the repo, like if we're doing it, then like we're sort of sure about it, and we're not just incurring all of this technical debt and maintenance on both sides. Yeah. There is a thread on ETH Magicians about forking the repos. I'll post it in the chat here if people want to engage there.
Any other questions for Tim? Okay. And Tim did threaten if we don't get any editors to work on this or people to write CL EIPs, then he's just going to dump our GitHub conversations onto the EIPs, which maybe it'll work. Okay, and then, oh, Mikhail, I skipped this when we were in the Capella. I apologize. We have a Engine API deprecation PR that Mikhail wants to propose. Mikhail?
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Danny. So this PR, yeah, the topic is deprecating exchange transition configuration, which I believe everyone is open to do this, because yeah, this method call is actually useless after the merge, and yeah, there are alternatives for instance, for node operators. They can use ETH chain ID or any other ETH method exposed in their Engine API endpoints to test that this endpoint is alive. CL clients doesn't need any kind of ping functionality because they are constantly calling fork choice updated and new payload and so forth. So yeah, I believe that we should deprecate this method and just remove it from this from clients. So, and I see two potential ways to do this. First one is simple and straightforward. So we just use the we just use a hard fork as a coordination point, and we just remove this method support from both sides. The downside of this approach is that if someone just publish a release of their client without support of this method, but the counterparty client that this node operator is running does not yet support the removal, so there will be warning messages in the logs of one of the clients for some period of time, unless the other parties until the other part is upgraded as well. Yeah, so that's the only downside, but it's simple and it doesn't require any additional interactions. The other way is to just say that, okay, so CL clients will still call this method, but if this method does not exist, it will not file any error messages. And the EL client on the other side will not log any error messages if this method is not called at all. This would be the first iteration. And we will use the, in this approach, we'll use the hard fork as a coordination point to introduce this first step. And then the second step is just, would not require any coordination, and client developers, client teams will be able to remove the support of this method whenever they want. So this actual PR proposes the second approach, but I don't feel that it is will be a big issue with going with the first approach. I just want to open this question up for client developers. What do they think about the potential approach to deprecate it? And the other question is whether there is a capacity to do this in Sepolia. I know that we don't want to make any last changes if they are not related to security upgrades or other significant things, but this one is kind of like a side of like the main block processing stuff, a side of main client functionality. So this is probably okay to make it into Sepolia. So yeah. What do people think about it?
I mean, we're at the point where we're intending to have releases in 8 or 9 days for Sepolia. So this is probably on the simpler side of things, but I'm not willing, unless people are very, very pro, to kind of force this down at this point. Are there outspoken people for this change? Anyone very against?
I'm in general for either option, either of the options, but to happen rather sooner than later. I feel they're quite low risk, and this has been useless for a long time.
Thank you. Any other comments here? Yeah, I mean, given the closeness, this is a very tough one to make a call on without comment. I think by default, we shouldn't be adding changes unless there's very strong consensus to do so. So I'm going to default silence to not doing this for the fork. I know, Dustin, thank you for your comment. But otherwise, if there are not comments, I think we should default to no.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it is okay to wait for another fork, so it should not be a big problem.
Okay, please do take a look at. Oh, I did not see that Marius and Sean had spoken up. So there are people are pro, not necessarily Shanghai. Sean might look at team capacity. Potas can look at team capacity. So I guess if Monday, Tuesday, all the teams on this PR say let's go, and that needs then we can. But I think by default, unless we do rally a bit of support over by early next week, then we should not do this.
Cool.
But Mikhail, if you want to keep it moving, you can knock on. Okay.
Yeah. Of course.
Okay, Marius does not do it. Default not do it unless a bunch of supporters rallied. Okay.
Okay, so not do it like meaning in this hard fork, right?
Correct.
Okay, so then let's just postpone it to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, last SSD transaction breakout room.
Yes, so there's been a lot of conversations about how the EL should go about SSDing the transaction types. And then it came up yesterday again on Forward 44 on the Forward 44 call. It's becoming, I think having a path forward on that is becoming not quite a blocker yet, but like will soon be a blocker to like EL work on 444. So we set up a breakout room next week, Wednesday, 15 UTC, to discuss this in more detail. Obviously, this is mostly an EL thing, but since EL folks have strong opinions about transaction and coding as well, so if you care about this, this is a time to show up, and then hopefully we agree on the path forward. But yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or discussion points for today? Great, thank you. I'm excited to keep Sepolia moving and deciding on the decoupling. Talk to y'all soon. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.